Hey, Bob, we're
I see
live,
it live on YouTube.
and it's Coding
All
Club,
right,
and it's come a long way from
right.
when you and I
Now, do you want me
started
to?
with computers. Yeah,
Oh, yeah. You want me to do the TI first?
whatever you want. So let me just real
Okay.
quick. Uh, what we're trying to do is we would like to try to figure out how to get our coding club going at the Fledge again. And uh, Bob has been instrumental in the coding club in the past year before the pandemic. And he's got some computers that he has built or had for a long time. He's got a very special computer in my heart that we'll get to in a minute. And Bob's going to show us a little bit of technology that he has that I hope you find interesting. And please give us some comments and all of that. And why don't I hand it over to you, Bob, to just show us what you got? And we'll spend a little time
Okay.
talking about that today.
Okay. I'm going to flip the camera around. Okay. Well, first of all, this is the TI-99 that we both have a history with. But I'll get back to that in a minute because I'm going to flip over here and show you. This is a right down there. This really small little thing is a an Altair 8800 clone. The MITS Altair was the original PC that hobbyists could get, and I'll try to find a couple of examples here to show you. Anyway, the Altair 8800, I got introduced to that. In fact, that's what got me into IT. And that was back in probably the mid 70s. I got a kit, they called it Kit of the Month Club. You paid $68.75, and they sent you a kit or a part of the computer. It took 8 months to get all the pieces. You had to solder it together and build this thing essentially from scratch. And when you were all done, and you had a computer, you had no keyboard, no mouse, no monitor. You had a box that had some blinking lights on it and some switches. And if you wanted to multiply two numbers, you had to set the switches in a certain order and then push a button and it would load 1 byte into memory. And then it would move the program counter up 1. And then you would reset the switches and push a button again, and it would go ahead and do that again. And pretty soon you could either like multiply two numbers or add them or some other things like that. This computer, when it was all done and put together, had a total of 1 kilobyte of memory, which would be 1024 bytes of memory, 1,024 bytes of memory. So we're talking pretty crude and old stuff. Now I'm going to haul out a picture of what this thing looked like, if I can get the right one up. Come on. Must have some things running in the background I forgot about. I just reset this computer when I was trying to get this thing up and running, and I don't. Let's see if I've still got the. Yeah.
So 1,024 bits, is that enough to hold Shakespeare?
You could probably condense Shakespeare, maybe 1 or 2 pages into it. That'd be about it. Why is this thing so stinking? So this thing's got 16 gig of memory And it's here we go. Okay, I think this is the one that shows a picture of what this thing looked like. Anyway, back to the story. I was living in Coopersville at the time. I was working in Muskegon, and my wife was working in Grand Rapids, and we lived in the middle. So I was sitting, and we had in this apartment, there was a back bedroom that was sort of like the office, and that's where I worked on this thing. I'd get home from work, and I'd start soldering and stuff. It's sort of like the old Heathkit stuff that people used to do, you know.
No, people don't know that.
Boy, this thing-
People forgot all this. So was that kit, was that from
Well-
like Popular Mechanics or Radio Shack or someone like that?
Well, it actually, they first showed it in Popular Electronics. Now this is the front page of one of the manuals that somebody stuck out there. This is what that computer looked like. And it's got those switches, and then there's lights or LEDs above them. So you would flip the switches to get a bit pattern, and then you'd push a switch to actually load that into memory. This was what it was like back then. But at that point in time, just to be able to have your own computer, even if you were doing machine language, was something like out of some science fiction movie, at that point in time. So, but these things were, let me see. Yeah, I think this is the manual this is the put it together manual. What I was hoping to find here, let me see if I can find the other one. They actually showed you some of the ways that they used to think about computing back in the day before you had a keyboard and a mouse and everything. Here we go. This is your conditions, your inputs. A true and a true equals a true. That's in this would be an and truth table, I think they would call it. I'm pretty sure that's what this was. Yeah. Digital design engineers refer to these tables or permutations as truth tables. A truth table for the and statement with two conditions is presented this way. And this is, then they show you up here in this thing, they show you the actual switches. So, if a switch is closed, you get a 1. If it's open, you get a 0 and all that kind of stuff. So you worked up from that stuff. And this is the kind of stuff you would sit down and build these things. Some of them were pretty complex. And then here's your and, or, not. And then you get into your nands and nors. Most of the actual electronics was done. They actually did it with NAND and NOR. And I don't remember the exact reason for it, but it was easier to build a NAND or a NOR circuit than it was to build an AND or an OR circuit. And then you'd wire these turkeys together, and this would give you the exclusive OR circuit. So that's a little bit of that kind of goofiness. Let me see, just for grins, if I can get it to actually work and load a program here. I can get it to the point where I've just turned it on. You have to turn it on first before you go, and then you interact with the thing with a, this thing is called TeraTerm. And I've got a serial connection, and I should be on COM4. And then you say, okay, and then you go in here and you do set up, and you go to serial port, and then you have to make sure that you're only at 2400 baud, which is pretty stinking slow by today's standards. And then this thing, you have to have a little pause or things get hinked up when you're trying to move information. So, and I say, okay. And now when I reset this thing, where's that reset button? There it is. This is what you get. I don't know if you can see it here. Maybe I can, well, I'm going to just move the phone up there so you can see it. And then this is telling you that you can type an H for help. This will show you the commands. There's the Altair monitor. There's Tiny Basic. There's a program for dumping your whatever's in memory. There's an enter where you can put stuff in memory. And then you can run. When you do the run command, you have to tell it where in memory you're going to start running it. There's a help command. And then this input from PRT and load, well, an output from PRT is if you do happen to have a printer that you can hook up to it. And then you can load a hex file. That would be something where you would actually have some kind of a hard drive or a disk drive of some sort. And then you can display registers in the computer. And then the trace is what you use to debug the program, because you can then step through the program one command at a time to see where things screw up. But that's how I got started in this stuff many moons ago, back in the Stone Age, as it were.
Well, you
So
know, it's super
now
intimidating,
that's
right?
sort of a little bit of a,
I mean, if I
well,
want to buy a computer now, and if I thought I had to go through all of
oh,
that, I would not want a computer. Not me, but the average
yes,
person,
but
right?
no, but well, and maybe we're not average, but basically at that time, this thing, ended up, 6875 times 8, what's 7 times 8, about a little over $500, 500, $600. So that was one thing. If you had money that you didn't know what to do with, which I didn't, there was a place in Ann Arbor called Newman Computing. And you could go down there and you could buy a PDP-8 or a PDP-11 or something like that, which were Digital Equipment Corporation computers. Those things cost about $5,000. So 500 or 5,000, 500 fit into my budget. That was still a tad of a stretch at that time because I was only making 10,000 a year. So, but that's what got me started. I would have,
And
I don't,
do you mind telling us what year that was?
I'm thinking that was somewhere 70. Yeah, it had to be like 71 or 72, something like that. No. It was probably 73 to 75, somewhere around there. Yeah, because we moved to Lansing in 77. And this was prior to that. I was living in Coopersville because I was working in Muskegon at Goodwill, the physical endurance program.
That's where you were working?
Yeah. It was, I was fresh out of college, or I had almost a master's degree. I had about 6 credits yet that I had to get. And, I was looking for a job, and I qualified to take over this thing. Some guy had started it, and he didn't know how to finish it. So I went in there because my background was experimental psychology, and they were testing people. They were trying to find whether or not somebody was malingering on pain. This was, factory workers in Muskegon, Michigan, worked in a piano factory or whatever. And they would say, oh, I got back pain and that. Well, then this program was supposed to be able to figure that out. You wired them up. So you were taking their galvanic skin response and their heart rate. And the theory at the time, or the science at the time, said that if you were in excruciating pain, your heart rate would go up and your galvanic skin response would change. But the guy that had started this project didn't really understand some of that stuff. So once I got there, I had to figure out what the heck was going on. So I headed down to MSU and found a guy that knew what galvanic skin response was all about. And he looked at my results that I had, and he said, that isn't galvanic skin response. That's your, what do you call it? Your, what the heck would it be? Your sensor that's picking up the galvanic skin response is pulling away from the skin. So that's why you're getting those big loops. So then I had to go and figure out and get that stuff all squared away. Anyway, in the meantime, I had to have something to do at home in the evening to keep my mind going. So that's when I got into this computery stuff.
So were you
let's go over
writing
and look
code?
at the TI.
Well, were you writing code
At
for
that
that
point?
job? Yeah.
No. I was, my background was experimental psychology from Western Michigan University. And it was good that I found this interest, because when this project, they pulled the plug on it after 2 years. And I had about 2 weeks notice, and then I was out on my ear. So I had to find something else to do. So I painted apartments with some buddies, and then a thing popped up for a job with the state of Michigan. And I'd taken a couple of programming classes. So I went to work and immediately went back to night school at LCC to figure out what the heck I was doing. So, but I had a little bit of experience after dinking around with this computer.
And about 10
So anyway,
years before this, we flew to the moon and back. Right?
Yep.
And so when we think about technology right now, and this is for all the kids listening, not every coding club are we going to do the history of computing, but we
Right.
want you to know that when I was a kid, when you were a kid, it wasn't, we didn't have Zoom, we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have all these things. I mean, we were a long, long way from even imagining that this was going to happen. We hardly had TVs.
We didn't have cell phones.
Yeah,
back in the day, the first thing I had that you'd call a cell phone, they used to call them a bag phone, because you had this little satchel that had this goofy, big, clunky thing in it, and you'd plug it into your cigarette lighter in your car, and that was the beginning of this. And now you can carry around more power in your pocket than they had in whole rooms full of computers back in the day.
Yeah.
So you want to switch over and look at the TI-99?
I sure do. I love the TI-99.
Well, here it is.
So do you mind if I give a quick preface? This is the first computer I ever owned. So in the 70s, I've told this story to some people before. My dad said, you're going to wrestle, you're going to get a scholarship to school, and you're going to go study computer science. So a lot of props to my dad for saying, kind of laying that path out to me. He was working for the Michigan Department of Transportation and trying to get them to come into the computer age. He bought me a TI-99, and to see that thing brings back lots of really good memories. Still there, Bob?
That's what this, I am.
Yeah.
And this is what my son found this in the basement, the house we used to live in. And so I went and found a power supply for it, which I'll show you, which is over here on the floor with all my messy stuff. But this was the power supply that I found on eBay. And so then the only other thing I had to do was I was looking for an old TV, because we used when you first got these computers, you had a little box that you could connect to a regular TV. Well, those boxes were like 20 bucks or 30 bucks on eBay, and they were used. You didn't know if they were going to work for sure. And then you had to find an old TV. Well, then I did a little surfing on the web, because we can do that nowadays. And I found this little device, which is, it converts the signal from the TI to HDMI, which then plugs into this monitor so that I could hook it up and run it. And it all came up and was live. So then, because I knew that Jerry and I would be talking about this today, I decided to, the other thing that I was lucky on was one of the other boxes that my son found was the actual manuals, user's reference guide. Up here, I guess, is where you see that it's for the TI 99 4A computer. And we're talking, this thing's a little bit more complex than the first thing I was showing you, but not a lot. And so then I thought, well, I should probably put in some programs. So then I went and found, they had in the back a couple of programs here, and this is called the random color dots. And then this is the actual, let's see, oh no, here's the code right here. I don't know if you can see it, but so I keyed most of this in. There was one line that would make sound, but I don't have anything that would put the sound out. So I just skipped that line and just went and put in everything else except for that one line of code, so that we had an actual running program. And this is the way it is. That's typed in. I just listed it. All you have to do is type in list like so and hit enter, and it'll list out your program. And then when you want it to go, you type in run and you hit enter. And boom, it clears the screen, and then it starts putting up these little, it's and there's some games in there too, but go ahead.
I was just going to say, do you remember that first time? Like, did you have to debug this ever? Do you remember all that? Like, it wouldn't work and you didn't know why, and the messages weren't clear.
Yeah.
And, man. So many days beating my head against that keyboard.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Back in the day, I had a subscription to a magazine called Byte. In fact, I've still got most of it. I tried to sell it on eBay one time, and I had like almost a 20-year continuous run of that magazine. And I've got like the first issue. I think I start with the very first issue and run for at least a decade. And then I forgot to renew my subscription, and I missed a half a dozen issues. And then I got it started up again and continued on for another decade. And I was going to sell that on eBay. But back in the day, at the beginning, they used to print programs in the magazine, and then you'd key them in. But then they also, for a while, did a thing where they barcoded the, this was early on and pretty sophisticated stuff, but they would barcode that program, and then you would have to have some kind of a reader for it. And then you could, and then they also did a paper tape thing for a while, where, there was just a whole bunch of holes, perforated piece of paper, And then they finally got to a point where I had a TRS-80, and that had an audio recorder that you could hook up and plug into this and put tapes in it, and then you could get programs that way and put them into your computer.
It's so, this must just
those
be
were the days.
Incomprehensible to a kid right now. That's, if we take one of the kids from the coding club a year ago, and
right,
them whipping up something in JavaScript or Python or whatever, this is just to have to do this just to do that. I mean, this is the beginning
Yeah.
of motion, right? This is the beginning of video.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing. So,
Yeah.
you know,
So I've also dug out a
yeah.
few other computers. I'm going to just take your, I don't have them hooked up to anything. And one of them I haven't had any luck with yet. But this was another relatively inexpensive computer that you could get. And I dug this out. This was the Timex Sinclair 1000. And
Like
it had
Timex, like
a
the
goofy
watch.
little keyboard. I think it was the same company. And then here, I'll show you this. Here, I'll set it down. I don't remember how much memory, and I do have some manuals for this thing, but I don't remember how much memory this thing had. But then you could buy a thing to hook onto it that had a whopping 16K. Now you're talking big time memory.
I'm pretty sure you can get
So,
16 terabytes on that same size right now.
oh yeah.
Well, I don't know
Oh
about
yeah.
that, but pretty
Nowadays.
close.
Yeah. Now over here, and this thing I've actually had hooked up and running. This thing here is a deck. They called it Altia. Was what the heck? I can't remember right now. It'll come to me. They had a proprietary CPU that they built that was a and it competed with the Intel type stuff that was of the same day. Well, here, get in here a little bit closer. And I think you can see, this is the memory there. And I think it's got like I think that's maybe 8K or something like that. This is a laptop hard drive that I'm trying to get in there so I can actually load an operating system on it. And but I had a problem with it initially, and I've actually got a little. This is this box right here is a. Oh, here it is. That little box sitting up there is just a power supply that I can set to different voltages because it had a battery pack inside of it that was 4.5 volts. And I finally found out that if you didn't have a good battery in there, the thing wouldn't even fire up. So I pulled the battery pack out and hooked this thing up and turned it to 4.5 volts, and the thing booted up, and I went, okay, I'm on my way. I'll show you the battery pack that was in there. This is what it was right there. Let's see if I can.
Oh, wait. Yeah.
There we go.
Huh.
So, but anyway, I've got 4 ancient computers, and I've actually able to get 3 of them live. The one is actually a new version of the old computer, but it's still pretty ancient stuff. I don't remember what the actual memory in it is, but I think it's got a little bit more memory than my original one had with the 1K. So, but things have moved around a long ways. That TI, this thing here that Jerry and I both had, I think originally that keyboard piece, or maybe it was a they had a few extra things with it, but it was probably around $500 back then. And in today's money, that would probably be 4 times that, probably $2,000. And it would be, it was a 16-bit processor, and it, I think it had maybe, I don't know, maybe, do you remember how much memory they had? I don't remember, but it wasn't a lot. It was still in the case.
I can't remember where I was yesterday.
Yeah. Well, anyway, just as sort of a little bit of where we've gone, today you can buy something that looks like this, which is, it just looks like a keyboard. But inside of that thing, here, I'll pull this out a little bit so you can see the back of it. Let's see here. I've got my everything plugged in there. This thing is a computer. It has 4 gigabytes of RAM. It has a 64-bit quad-core processor. And this thing is $70. Now, yeah, you have to get a power supply for it, and you have to hook it up to a monitor and all that. So you might have a little bit more than $100 in it, and you've got a pretty powerful little computer.
Probably
We can-
10,000, more than that. Shit, I can't even do the math right now on
Oh,
how
the
many,
amount of-
the amount
Oh,
of
yeah.
TIs that represents is thousands
Right, yeah.
and thousands.
Right. I looked up, they did a comparison to a one of the newer Raspberry Pis, and they compared it to, God, I can't remember if it was a TRS-80 or one of the other of that same ilk. And it was thousands of times more powerful and a lot of times cheaper. So
Yeah.
we can get into that some more at another point in time if you want.
Well, let's use this as our breaking point. Or oh, wait, do you
Okay.
want to show us that?
No.
No, that's beautiful.
Well-
Let's see that too.
What this is, and I have to connect to it via VNC, but these are 4 Raspberry Pi Zeros. Raspberry Pi Zeros cost $10 a piece. They are all hooked together as a sort of a micro supercomputer. I sort of got the idea to try this after I had done this one over here. This one over here has 4 Raspberry Pi 4. Each of them has 2 gigabytes of memory. And there's 4 of those hooked together. Now this one here, let me turn on my monitor that's hooked to. I don't have a keyboard hooked up to it or anything. Oh, it's still got something there. Okay. Anyway, this thing is running software that it's what they call parallel processing. So when you run a program here, all 4 of those work together to solve the program. In fact, what's on the screen right there is a listing of the programs that are in there right now. So, but things have moved along a long ways now.
I would guess that few $100s that you have invested in that, and just a room as big as my sanctuary, probably to do the computing in the 70s or the 60s.
Oh yeah.
Whenever we were
Yeah.
going to the moon, I always
Right.
liked that analogy.
I worked, one of my first jobs that I got when I was working in IT, I worked for CompuWare, and they put me on site at AT&T. What the hell was it that they call it? It was, it was the phone company essentially down in Detroit. And I worked there, and one day because we just sat at desks with terminals, and we'd key stuff in and do whatever we were doing and check stuff out. And one day, one of the guys came by and said, "Hey, let's go over to the computer room. We've got to check out some stuff." And so, this was a whole campus there, and we walked into this building, and you walked into this room, and it was huge. It was not as big as a football field, but probably half the size of a football field. And there were racks and racks and stacks of all of this hardware. You could just look down there past all of this stuff, and this kind of stuff that's sitting here would probably do more computing than a whole room full of that stuff back in the day. So yeah.
Yeah. So
Things have
what do you
changed.
think? What can we get out of learning about this history here? What do you think?
Well, I think basically, if you've got a good understanding, whether you actually look at a really old one, or if you get to understand, what's under the covers in a new one, so you're going to learn that binary number system and what it is and how it works and all that stuff, and then you're going to learn about the different types of what's in there as far as the processors and the memory and everything else, how it all works together. That to me is pretty important, because then once you understand that, you can see how you can leverage it to make it, like this thing here, you've got 4 of these things working together, rather than here, I'll get back to that, because you've got 4 of those things working together, doing parallel processing. So back here you see these little blue and gray wires. Those are going into a switch. And then there's also a power pack back there that's feeding all of these things. But to me, if you understand the binary arithmetic underneath everything, and then you understand how they build the machine language, and then the assembly language, and then your higher level languages, I think you have to have an understanding of your hardware and what's under the covers and how your software hooks into that to really have a good understanding of computing.
Yeah.
And that's
And I
probably
think,
because that's how I learned it.
well, this is computer science 101. I mean, it's ones and zeros.
Yes.
It's hardware that's taking electrons basically and charging something and not charging something. And it's all built from that.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I think we take for granted all of this, right? That your
Right.
hard drive
Yeah.
manages your memory, all of that stuff for you. So I think
Yeah.
this is a good breaking point for us today
Okay.
to say, all right, Coding Club isn't always going to be a history lesson, but Coding Club needs to have history lessons. And today is episode 1 of the Fledge's Coding Club. And
All
I
right.
think it's a spectacular walk through
Yes.
possibility. I mean,
Yep.
just seeing that first one brings back so much memory, and
Oh yeah.
no pun intended, I guess. And then seeing your supercomputer laid out that way in Raspberry Pis it's incredible. It's incredible.
Yeah. There's some wild stuff out there. Come a long
So what do you want to
ways.
say to the kids that might want to come to Coding Club next week? What do you like any message for them?
Well, just if they've got something they want to do, bring it up, and we'll see if we can figure out how to do it or whatever. I'm sure that and it depends. Do all of these kids have computers? Do they have ones where they can play around with this stuff? That might be something to think about too.
Yeah.
I could probably scour up a couple of these Raspberry Pis, at least the Raspberry Pi Zeros or something, and I don't know. We can figure some stuff out. There's a whole bunch of, and the other thing too that maybe we could get into, and I don't know if that would be stretching the boundaries, but maybe we could get into some of the electronics and robotics and all the rest of that stuff. And dink around with transistors and different types of chips, maybe some Arduinos,
Yeah.
learn how to code them. and stuff like that. So there's a whole lot of stuff that's available to us.
Well, if I've learned anything in doing my YouTube shows and virtualizing this year, we can do whatever we want. So
There you go.
let's figure out what
There
we're
you
going
go.
to do next week, and let's call it a wrap for today's coding club. And thank you
Okay.
for watching. Next week we'll be able to. Oh, Dustin is chiming in. I just now saw him. Dustin saying
All
100%
right.
true. Learn programming without libraries. So let's build it from the ones
Yes.
and zeros, right? So thanks for
There
the
you go.
contribution, Dustin. We'll expect to see you on here soon, and we'll be opening up and getting more of a crowd in here as we go.
All right.
Mr. Zwemmer, thank you so very much.